get started here. So I just to provide you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering here. So today I just want to start off this morning reviewing forecast gear software and all basically the software's features. So what you guys can do with it. I won't go into every single aspect because it is excessive and there's a lot of stuff that's really very advanced. And not really meant for what you guys want to use the model for, such as like equation fitting and things like that. But we can always talk about that at another time. Also, we are going to move through, of course, the model equation file, what we call it, and look at all the macros that will be used to run the system in detail. Then we're going to, hopefully by the end of the day here, we'll have the model solved. And then we can start going through how to tune a forecast and the many components of that. And again, after that, we can also look at how we would run some shocks on the system as well. And then by tomorrow, we should be able to get into the major project system. I'm not sure if anyone's had an opportunity to look at that yet, but I'll go through it with you. And we can talk about some of the projects that are in there and, what you guys can give me some other ideas if you have other things you've heard about that we'd like to add and how you could add a project. We can go through that process. Also, of course, updating data in the model as you guys were requesting. So I think Tara would be interested in the putting in new demographics or imposing your demographic views for the period, that type of stuff. And then, of course, otherwise you can just modify them however you see fit. So there's a lot of options here on how you use this forecasting tool. So we can also look at a bit of the provincial tax rate stuff as well tomorrow. But I'll give you a bit of advanced warning. It is somewhat limited, but we can get into that at that time because tax rate modeling, this isn't a detailed tax model, of course. So but we'll talk about that at a later point, probably tomorrow, of course. And other than that, as we go here, this typically, in my experience, as I provide the training, new topics pop up. We get new ideas as we go, so we can try to explore some of that stuff if we can establish these ideas by the end of today, and I can always look into how we could explore them for tomorrow's session as well. And then lastly, now we are scheduled to end at 4:30 today, and I will say. This will be a very long day, so your brain should be full by the end of today, so or even early afternoon. So we'll see how we get to, and in my experience providing training, the pace of this session will depend on the user's backgrounds and that type of stuff, right? So sometimes you have people that aren't very experienced with using file systems and software in general, and then other times you have people that are highly advanced, and you can just sort of fly through certain parts of the training. So we'll see where we get to, and that will depend, of course, on everyone's background as we go. Okay, so may as well get started here now. So does everyone have the software installed? Okay, yep. Excellent. And secondly, does everyone know about the where the installation folder is installed, and that there are? Let me share my screen here so we can get going. Oops, wrong button. Okay, so if you're familiar with your whole file system, this is of course Windows Explorer. And looking in the program files, x86 folder, there's your Forecast Gear 5 installation folder. And within that, you'll find the tutorial, of course, which Thomas has already gone through, probably quite in length. But you also get your manual in here, so that you're gonna hopefully need to rely on this quite often just to brush up on your commands and such. So I just wanted to make that clear that this is where the manual is located. If you ever want to take a look at what's going on with some of the code, if you forget anything, you can always obviously take a look in there. Okay, so I will get the software open here. So the way I set this up is I have made just a ProvMods folder on my C drive. So the first thing you always want to do here is get in and set your working folder. So where you're going to be working on the model. In my case, I made a folder called ProvMods off my C drive. So you'll go up in here to the program options. Click on this box. You can also access it through the options tools menu bar item at the top here. But pretty much everything within all these menu boxes or drop downs are provided right here as icons to select. So coming in here, you're going to set your working directory. Now you always want to do this first. Make sure you're set up here. Otherwise, every time you go to try and access a file within the software, you'll have to browse to the proper folder otherwise. So you certainly don't want to be on the main C drive or somewhere else in this case. So hopefully everybody is aware that that this is the first step you have to do. Secondly, I wanted to talk to you guys a bit about text editors and what you're using these days. Now, I think I spoke with David earlier, and you guys some of you may be using TextPad. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Because there's also, this is one I was emailing David about. We're now using Notepad++. I find it to be far superior software package. It's actually it's a shareware piece of software, so you can just download it off the web, right off their website. It's actually developed or made by the developer community. So it's got a lot of excellent features in it, you know, and one of them is just the standard, you know, zooming in, for example. So if you're working on perhaps a projector system and you just want to, you know, work as a group, you want to blow things up, so you can pan in and out by holding the control button and zooming in and out, those types of features. It's also got a lot of these plug-in macros that are built by the developer community that you just download. They have these plug-in folders. One of them that's incredibly helpful is this compare feature. So what that does is if you had two versions of the same macro, for example, or perhaps somebody took the model and worked on some of the files in a separate folder and you wanted to know what changes were made, you can do this compare feature and it will take two files and show you exactly what has been changed and putting them side by side. And it's incredibly useful. And there's a whole there's hundreds and hundreds of these different plugins you can get to help out depending what your interests are. So really an excellent software package. And of course, as I said, it's free. So they're always updating it and improving it. So you may want to look into that. But if you're using TextPad, that's fine as well. There was nothing wrong with that system. We just found that the Notepad++ was a bit better for our usage, we found. Secondly, are you have a syntax highlighting, as you can see here? I can't see you guys because I'm switching screens. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add. I want to add to what you're saying. The Notepad++ software. Yeah, we did have a talk over the summer, and I did get it working on my machine.
Okay.
However, I totally forgot about it, and when I opened up Forecast Gear last night, I was like, oh yeah, Notepad++. So, long story short, I'm just in the process of to the MBS people. I'm just in the process of copying a folder up into a software folder up on the server. If you guys want to copy that down and use the Notepad++, as far as I know, there's no install for this, so that should be fine. And then second, I just had a quick question for you, Aaron. Is that should the MBS people have all of that the provincial model on our machine ready to go?
Not right now. You don't have to.
Okay.
We're gonna do all this. We're gonna do all this training through my machine.
Okay.
I just want to. You guys may want to go play with it at the end of the day today, or something like that. And
okay.
It's just. I just want to know, basically.
Okay.
Do you have it ready, or am I just
okay.
Talking about nothing? And so, you know what I mean. So.
All good.
Yeah.
Thank
no,
you.
it's fine. You won't need it for this session. we'll just be looking at my machine, pretending like we're all sitting next to each other on one computer. Okay, yeah. So anyways, the syntax highlighting, if you get Notepad++, I can just give you this XML file, and then you'll just import it. If you have these language settings here, you can create your own user-defined settings. So you can set whatever colors you like. In this case, we paint the macro commands one color. We like to paint the semicolons and the brackets, for example. It helps incredibly. You don't go blind by the end of the day if you're doing a 7-hour modeling session, looking for brackets and so forth. And then if you do select on the bracket, it highlights the end bracket. So it really helps when you're looking at some of the pretty extensive equations built into this system as well. So I just highly recommend it. And I can, like I said, whether you're using TextPad or Notepad++, I can give you that syntax highlighting file if you don't already have it. So we have them both. So it's whatever your preference is for software, really. Okay. So as long as you've got some type of editor, second thing you'd want to do after your working directory setup is make sure that you have your editor set up here in this editor box. So you can just browse to the exe file wherever it's located. In this case, program files, Notepad++, notepad++.exe. And the reason you want to have that set up is every time you go to edit a macro, it will obviously open that software for viewing all of your files, whether it be the model, the table files, things like that, the macro files, and also the lists that we also use in this system. So you do want to have that set up ahead of time. Okay, so if you have all that stuff done, we can start looking at the concept of databases here. So with forecast year, if you're not familiar with modeling, I know some of you guys already know what you're doing here and others may not. Of course, we have the concept of databases. Now, forecast year uses what we call write databases, and they're over here, if you can see my screen, and also read databases. Now, typically, and at the bottom of this software, we have what databases you have open listed in this box. So you can have only one write database open at a time. You can have, I'm not sure, it may be up to 30 or 40 read databases. You'll never need that many, but you can just open, dozens of them if you need to, depending what you're accessing. But typically we would open up a read base, get what we need out of it, and then close it, and then open up another one, that kind of process. So you typically don't need that many open at a time, but you can open as many as you need to if you do need them. Okay. Secondly, so we have the view variable system within forecast year. So in this case, I'm opening up the Manitoba forecast database. Now, if you're not familiar with our database names, the MN202 in this case. So the way we set up our systems, I believe we're providing you guys with a biannual update on this system. So we'll get, at the start of the year, you'll get your 201, and the 2.0 is the 2020, of course. So next year, your next version of your model is going to be 2.1.1. And then by the summertime, we'll be sending you 2.1.2. So that's just basically version control. So we know which forecast we're looking at here. Now you'll notice that I put the old forecast, our 2.01 forecast in here. And this was developed pre-COVID. So I brought it up for just for comparison purposes. So you can't beat us up too much on it if it looks crazy compared to the new one. But it is in here as well. And that's how you read these. So with this history database, just the MN202 in this case, we then create a forecast database where we add the F onto it. And I'll show you how that's created once you run the modeling system. That's basically the database that's created. And then all the data, once it's solved, is unloaded out of the data set into that database at the end. So essentially all we're talking about is a history base and a forecast base. So if I open up the forecast base in write mode here, Now you have the option to view all kinds of variables. So up at the top here, you have your view variables box. You can also access it up here on the menu bar. But typically all we ever use is this, the view variables button. And within here, now there's all kinds of things you can do. You can put in equations, you can add whatever you like to view. Every variable you do add is just going to have to be separated by a space, for example. So in this case, I'm looking at overall consumer spending, the C variable, consumption of services, that kind of stuff. So you can put that in. I think the default will be an annual frequency. We are working with an annual model here, so there's no problems. But if you do need to look at different frequency of data, you have the option right here of altering that. Now, if I did select quarterly and tried to look at an annual variable, I would get an error on that. Incorrect date range, clearly. So let me just put that back in, for example. Now, of course, you're going to have your date range here. So let's just look at it to 2030. Your number of decimals, you want to view the data for. The function stuff, we don't typically have to use this, but it does show you what type of options you could enter, type of analysis you could perform on a variable. So things like the mean, the min, the max, that sort of stuff. Just some quick functions that are available to use for this stuff. I'd say I don't use those very often at all. We also have the graph options in here. We won't get into that right away here. And then secondly, how do you want to look at the output at the end here? So in a spreadsheet format, of course, you're just looking at the actual numbers, like so. You can pull statistics on them. So if maybe I set let's just look at the forecast period, 20 to 30 in this case, run some statistics. So you'll get all kinds of stuff here. The min, the max, average, look at some of the deviation, and of course some of your statistical tests being performed on these variables. And so here is the consumption component, aggregate consumption right there, and there's your services. So it'll just list variable after variable on these statistics in order that you entered them. You can also graph as well. So here we're just looking at line graphs. Now, Forecast Gear's graphing system, and I'll get into this next when we look at the graph component. It's not that powerful. This is obviously it's a quick viewing version, but if you're going to be producing presentations and so forth, you probably just want to export your spreadsheet data, the data into Excel, and create your charts that way because they're much prettier. You can also run correlations on these to see obviously how they're linked together. So quite a few options there. On the variable options as well, now you can, oh sorry, I should go do this one first. So there's also something helpful here called we call the database index. So hopefully that looks like a little index card to you, if you remember those. And here you have your database, basically every single variable that's listed in the base. I'm not sure how many there are, might be about 4,000 here. But you can also search for these, for example. So perhaps C star would give you, then hit update list, all your C variables. Or if you're looking for population, perhaps DP, things like that. So just a quick way of searching. You can also do this in reverse. You could say maybe 15 to 24-year-olds we're looking for. So we have households, population, males, things like that, mortality rates. So that's the kind of stuff you get, options you can use or do with the wildcard box here for searching for information.
Aaron, sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So your list of variables there in the index database, is there any glossary of terms to help someone familiarize themselves with all of those variables, or is it kind of just trial and error and just through experience you kind of learn them?
No. Let me get that for you. So what we do have is a base index system. Where am I? I can find my folder. Now what we have, I'll show you here. It's called define variables .mac. So this is in the main model folder. or the Manitoba model folder. And what this does, it typically runs at the end of our batch system. So this is your definitions. So it uses this def var command. You have the definition of every single variable right here in the model. So you can come in here anytime. I typically just come into this file and look for them. I find it's a bit faster, and then you can just use your find feature in your text editor. So that's one quick way of doing it, of course. So perhaps we're looking at a TI variable. Something, well, that might not be helpful. Something more complicated, but you know, if you pen down this, what do we have? Several thousand lines of code here, and giving you the definition. So, but what this actually does, if I get out of here, where am I now? I'm not sure if I have them run, this thing run. It's my variable list. Yeah, the model index isn't found. So one sec, let me just run that file. Now we might have to make a fix here. Anyways, I'll get this fixed up for you and send it to you. But we're always changing the model. This might be an old list. But typically you can come in here at any time, Thomas, and look these up. And if you don't know what something is, I mean, just shoot us an email. We'll get back to you in no time. Get it all cleared up for you. But yeah, we do define all of our variables, of course, because yeah, there are a lot of them. Okay, so moving back to the software. So you got some other options in here. So I think I went through it. We went statistics, graphing, things like that. Whatever you want to do here, it's all visible. Secondly, if I was to have multiple databases open, for example, so if I open up a read database within view variables and you go into this index card, there's a drop down so you can switch between databases, for example. And that's definitely helpful because usually we are working with multiple databases open at once, and you may just want to see what something's doing in a separate base, but just be aware that you would have to do it this way and switch them at the top there using the index feature. Finally, we can look at, so if I view this one, view a couple different variables, for example, one after another. We have what we call last expression, so that will just bring up the last one you were looking at. And that's helpful when you're tuning a variable. You could look at it, run the model, and then view it again. So just bring it, and then obviously if you've typed in a whole bunch of stuff here, then it'll just bring it all back for you. And also the last expression list. So this will give you a history of everything you've looked at as well. So you can, you start looking at different layers, different angles of variables, adding other variables in there. So you can bring up everything you've looked at previously here and select from those, for example, and it'll just pop that up. As well, we have the replace text option. So if you would like to change something, this is more helpful for our purposes because we model across provinces, but you could use the replace text and change MNs to ABs for Alberta, for example, and that'll just switch us into the, except for it is case sensitive, as you can see here. It didn't switch everything, so I'd have to do this twice in this case. But those are the types of features that you can do here. Of course, variable not found because we are not in Alberta. That's the type of stuff you can do in terms of viewing variables. You can also manually create a new variable here. It's not really used very often, but you could call it a test or something like that. You can make up a new variable in that base by hand rather than using a macro to create that variable. So everything you can do in a macro file, you can do manually within the software. You can also delete variables. Something you don't like in here, you can get rid of it. There's also compacting and expanding, so that would take different frequency data, perhaps monthly data, and turn it into an annualized variable, vice versa if you wanted to expand something from an annual variable into a monthly or quarterly variable, that type of stuff. We probably shouldn't go through the rest of these. You can read about some of these in the manual. And you probably won't be using this stuff too much, but the options are all here. There's a lot of functionality within Forecast here that is there but not typically used, and certainly not for just what you guys want to do or even what we do on a day-to-day basis. So next thing you really need to know about and is incredibly helpful is the tables and quick table options. So what we have in here, we provide you guys a standard sort of table package. We are working on these. Now, a lot of these things may not mean much to you. They do mean a lot to us. So we don't actually call it investment. We're sort of calling them more named up with the variables because we're just so familiar with them. But these pre-defined tables, here's key analysis, for example. So here we've developed a table, a standard table that we need to look at all the time. So you have your GDE components in the top here. So your C plus I plus G, X minus M, all that type of stuff. Moving in, then we do a sort of labor market block here with your source pop, labor force, employment, unemployment part rates, all that kind of stuff. Again, then getting into the demographics a little bit, we put our aggregate population and net migration. So very, very important. And this is basically all the key stuff you need to know when you're developing your forecast without getting into all the sub detail, really. And then the residential sector is a big component of this model. So we're looking at household formations and the housing start numbers. So Thomas, you may have, Thomas was involved in a presentation we did for BuildForce last week, or a week and a half ago here now. And we do a lot of detail in the residential sector. So we have disaggregated the housing starts into their structure type components in this model. And it's pretty important for our needs, and maybe not so much in Manitoba, but you do have significantly different cost differences in the structural types. So that's it helps drive the residential investment equation, that type of stuff. Of course, your CPI, retail sales. So we put sort of some of the price stuff down here at the bottom, and then our income components right in this block here, looking at sort of labor income, personal income, also the corporate profit information. And then finally, these are just some of the key things that we like to put in here so you don't have to go all the time. You know, of course, the interest rate assumption, the exchange rate, where things are going, and looking at some of the per capita GDP numbers. So when you have these tables developed, now the best way, you guys may want to make up your own tables, depends what your interests are. We have a whole bunch of other tables that we don't include in this system anymore. You know, you could slice and dice the demographics, for example, into whatever types of angles you're interested in looking at them. I mean, here we do have a demographics table looking at the broad population groups. Also, I think these are still 5-year average groups, but this is a single year of age population. There is a single year of age population model integrated into this modeling system. So obviously there'd be a lot of lines here as we show all the ages from 0 up to 90 and over. But it is not included in this current table. We're just looking at the broad groups in this case. Okay, so if we were to need to create our own table, how would we go about doing that? So I've now selected the demographics table in this case. Within this variables tables box again, here we have specify table. So you can look at and see how this concept works. Open that box up. You have your table title. You have a subtitle, which would just be the line below the top line. So we could put sort of test in here. Test subtitle, for example. And then a spreadsheet tab name. You wouldn't see this when you're viewing the table, You would see this when you're exporting the table to an XLS file, or perhaps a CSV file. So that'll just give you a tab name within Excel. So that's helpful when you're doing sort of a multi-table exporting dump into a spreadsheet system where you want to look at everything. And you guys, I believe we send that to you, the table system, when we send you the forecasts. So entering this type of information here, of course, and then viewing the table, that's what it does. I mean, you're just going to give you a title, give you a subtitle, and all the table rows thereafter. Take that back out, view it again, and they disappear, of course. So that's all it's about. So of course you can give yourself, say, MBS forecast January 2021, for example, something like that, and then who knows, maybe say preliminary January 12th, for example. You could do that kind of stuff in here. And you can automate this as well through a macro system, which I'll show you in a minute here. But it's just to keep a record on your stuff once you're creating these. Perhaps you're creating numerous versions of the forecast, or you're constantly tweaking something every week, and you have to get this information to somebody. That's the type of stuff you could do with these options here.
Sorry, Aaron, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
On your view table there, you're showing us how you could make adjustments to the table and create new tables. And
Yes.
in the text box there were, all of the content for that table, and there were equations. If you were to modify and adjust the equations in that content, would that impact the forecast at all, or is the table part completely separated from that?
Completely separated.
Okay.
So let me show you that. This has nothing to do. This is just a way of telling forecast gear. It's pre-programming tables essentially. Depending on what these are tables you're going to use over and over and over again. So you can design them any way you like. Now, one way of doing that is by entering. These are what we call the table rows, right? So the way you put this information in is exactly how it's going to be viewed or presented once you view that table file. So what you can do here, now you can do, if you want to create a table, you can do it within this box, but I do not recommend it. You want to use a good quality text editor in this case. So that's where these import and export buttons come into play. Now, when I say export, for example, so it says export table rows, say yes, IMP file exists, replace, yes, it's fine. So what that is, and now I go to the MN folder, for example, and within this folder, the way our tables work is there's an IMP file. We call it, so here's all my IMP files, for example, and you'll have these when we send you the model. So these are text files. That's all they are. These are the text files. You can view them. You just, you right click these files in your properties and you associate them with your editor. I should have just selected one, of course. And you would associate them, right? You say opens with, and then you could just change that and browse to Notepad++. So that's one way of doing it. So when I open this up as a text file, this is what I get. So you can see all the table rows. Not sure why it's not highlighted. It's interesting. And what we can do here, Thomas, is you can make all your edits here. So test, add this, whatever, this row, it doesn't matter. Save the file, go back into forecast gear, and now you would import. And it brings it in. So that's all we're doing here. So when you create a new table, why don't we do that as a demo? I'm just going to grab a bunch of rows here so we don't have to type it all out. Go to new file here. Put that in. This is our new table. Now, when you do save it, this is a little bit tricky because, oops, I was already on that. So when you have to create these files, what you want to do here is on your drop down, and they hide this right at the top. you set it as an all file type. And you can call it new table.imp. By doing that, it allows you to set the file extension. So I create that IMP file, and then I go in here and I say tables choose. Now, once you start typing it, it's just going to pop up like that. So you just, if I just put the N in, it's right there. So you go down, you select that IMP file, and what that does is create table yes. The way this works, you'll notice these have TBL file extensions on them. So these are in binary code. So the actual table files are at the bottom, and well, I have this sorted this way, but here's all my actual tables right here. So these are the binary version that Forecast Gear reads, and they, of course, they include all that title, the subtitle, tab names, all that extra information in them, whereas the IMP files are the text versions of the table rows. So it just allows you to make these edits in an editor, build your tables there. And now after I've created that table, you would then go to your specify table. And as you can see, all I did was create a new TBL file at this point. And that TBL file is called new table. You can see it showed up right here on the main screen. So in this case, now I would just import. Otherwise, you look at it, you're going to have a blank table. And then I can just look at that, and there you go. So that's basically how you can do this. Now, all this information is in the manual as well. If you ever need any help with it, of course, just send us an email. But you can basically develop any type of table looking at any important variables for yourself using this method. That's
Aaron?
really, yes.
Yeah, sorry, it's Mike. So one of the things that's come up in the past is that our finance group was looking at the tables, and this is really good to know, because a lot of times what they're trying to do is incorporate into what they call the survey of forecasts, forecasters. So they try to match. So they look at things interprovincially to see, okay, what's the forecast for real GDP across the country for the next 3 years. But the one component that they want to include in there is nominal GDP. And I think in one of the tables that you produced, it didn't include nominal GDP. And I think we were asking for that. But with this sort of application, I'm sure what we could do is create that table so that it reflects nominal GDP or whatever variables they want to see, so that they can sort of append that. Because what they've been doing is actually they're including Stokes forecast now as part of their survey of forecasters.
Right.
So it's this is really interesting. So I'm glad you guys went over this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, all of our clients use this. We don't even know what tables they have, but they've made all their own tables, right, behind the scenes. So I mean, we give you our general system here, our standard set of tables. People typically want to modify. They want to change the order that the variables are viewed in. They want to change what is actually being viewed in here. It really depends on the user. So you can customize your tables any way you like, of course, and this is how you would do it. So of course, there's thousands of there's almost 4,000 variables in this model. A lot of things you could look at that we are not covering in these tables that I'm showing you here. So you can set up any angle you like. It's really up to you. But yeah, of course, everything is in the databases. You just need to know what variable you're looking for. So you can always ask us if you need any help with that stuff. Okay, so I think for the tables, we've covered most of this. There used to be, what I should show you here. But the first time you install your software, it's going to look like that. So you guys may have that view, maybe wondering where did those tables come from. So this is basically taking us back about 8 years or so. before we created this quick table system. So you used to have to go, every time you wanted to select a table, you had to go table, choose, pick your table, and then view your table, make sure you got the right date range, and like that. So that it used to be a very lengthy process, and it would drive us nuts because you like to jump in and out of different pre-created tables to see what's changing, given that this is a dynamic modeling system, right? So you create more jobs, you create more income, consumption's going to go, all those types of feedback effects across the equations. So it was a very slow process, having to constantly choose the table and then go view the thing and set your dates, do that over and over and over again. So we developed a quick table system, and the way you can access that is through the program options box again, and there's a tables tab here, the third tab, and then you just click on that quick tables. I don't believe that is selected. The quick tables checkbox is selected here as the default. So once you do that, it pops up all the TBL files that are contained in the modeling folder, wherever you set that working directory, right? So that's just helps you out. And that way you can just double click them. They pop up. Now, if you want to set the date range, it's down here at the right. You can also do it through view variables, for example. So if I go in here and say 2019 to 2050, for example, then look at it. So we got 2019 to 2050. I believe if I was to, so that once I set that date range, it sort of becomes the program date range for now. But then say I set this back to 2000 and looked at, I don't even just say CMN again. Now, if I looked at the employment table, see it's reset that date range to 2000. So you typically, when you're using the quick table system, you may want to keep changing these date ranges. It's up to you. How much history you're trying to look at. It just depends on what you're looking for, really. But when you use that quick table system, just be aware of what your date range is set at, and everything's listed right here. You can see we have the whatever date range you're operating under, whatever table is currently selected in this case. And the reason we do this is when I showed you that specify table box here, rather than going in and saying choose demographics, specify table, you could just click on the demographics, or say click on the key analysis table and then say specify. It's just maybe a quicker way to switch it. But
I'm so glad you showed us that there, Aaron, because you're absolutely right. Previously, I would just one by one select tables.
All right.
And yeah, it's not a very efficient way of doing it. Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah.
Definitely.
No, the quick tables saved our lives, I would say. Definitely made our days less exhausting, I guess. So clicking all these times. Way too much clicking going on when you're creating a forecast. So try to minimize it with this system. So that's I think that's the gist of tables. So importing, exporting, that's all you're really doing here is taking it. Just think of it this way. Right now, when we're looking at the specify table box, we're looking at the TBL file here, right? And when I say export, you're sending that TBL file, those rows, to the IMP files, which is a text file. And then you can go edit it in the text file, and then you can bring it back in with your import command. So it just really sends it back and forth to that text file, and then back to the TBL file, which is, again, in a binary format. You cannot look at these TBL files. You'll just, here, I'll look at one for you. Let's look at one, and that's what it looks like. So of course you can generally read the rows, but there's a lot of binary stuff at the top here. That's all within the programming. So it's just not what you want to do. Okay, I think so. Is that pretty clear for everyone? No major issues there. Just looking through my list here because I have a whole bunch of stuff in order. Specifying. Okay, secondly, Now, another important thing that I've done here, this is something we do in-house, and I can show you our system for the table. So if you guys were to create a whole bunch of different tables, you may want to just create a folder, for example, and put all your IMP files in here, like so. But then you can also have a macro that can automate the process of creating these tables, giving them titles, giving them subtitles, tab names, all that kind of stuff. And here in this case, I've created this one, table info manitoba.mac, I called it. So here these commands are all in the manual, but here this is what you can do with it. So each round, if I was to move into this folder and run this macro, we'll go through this later, but this is what we call for lists. And you don't actually need this here, but we have it because I took this from our provincial modeling system. So I used to have Alberta, BC, Ontario, all these, all the provinces in here. And what this is a for list is essentially a loop command, if you're familiar with programming. So it jumps into this first for list. So here I have a layered for list. So that's why I tabbed them in. So it jumps into the first list. It says Manitoba, and that uses this mnemonic prov in this case, or this parameter, we call it prov. The second for list is then the tables parameter. So it's going to go through this list of tables, and these are every table that I've included in this folder. And then it basically runs a macro command on these. So it'll start with, of course, we only have one layer here. So I could have put -mn on all these, but and that's typically probably how you guys would have it set up. So you would only have one layer in your for list. So it'll go in, it'll take Manitoba, it'll go to the asset investment table, it'll run the table text command. So this one, it's not only adding text, it imports that IMP file into the TBL file in that case. So that it's an automated way of doing this, of importing from the IMP to the TBL. So in this case, it runs table text. It does that parameter. So here it would fill in asset investment dash and then prov mn. So if you look at the file asset investment dash mn, then it'll import IMP and it'll set the text as that. So that's just a way of importing it, an automated way of doing it. Secondly, then what was more important here for your needs would be more like this type of stuff. You can preset all your tables, titles and subtitles and that kind of stuff. So in this case, we have a for list, which wouldn't be needed in this case for you because you're only doing one province. But you would have your table text command, then set the title, so asset class investment. So when I do look at this table, if I can run this thing. I don't know if there is a table in it. Probably that one doesn't even work. It's not good. So all this really is a way of adding titles and doing an automated procedure for doing it. The good thing about this system, as you can see here, we're using parameters on the right as well. So I could create a new parameter here, call it version or something. And then at the top, I could put macropar, version. I need a tilde there. And call it January 12th, 2021 forecast or something like that. So what it would do, as you ran this, it would then add the title. It could then add that, it would fill that in with January 12th, 2021. So every day, say you created a forecast on a Thursday, then you created a forecast on a Friday, you wanted to keep track of these controls, you could just come in here and change that to the 13th or the 14th, whatever, so on and so on. Then when you dump your tables, you can have that date put on them, for example. So it's just it's a way of really dealing with that issue, and we can look at that a little more if that type of thing would be beneficial for you. But in this case, you could do that more so. There's an export table system as well, or a command as well, that we can look at to do that type of control. Again, then we also have the tab name. You also can control the subtitle by putting the subtitle in as well. So it's same type of option, but I hope you get the concept here. So all this is doing is creating your tabs. So basically, when I send you guys our provincial reports, where are we here? This is what we're doing. We're just programming all these tables to have this. So we've added a title here. You can see how we control with our version stuff as well. So we call it the November 2020 forecast. And then we're giving all these different tables the tab name, just so you can find the information properly. But this is the end result of setting up all this stuff in a pre-programmed format.
Aaron?
Yes.
So just to confirm, the macro that you were showing us there, the purpose there is to auto-generate our list of tables. Is that correct?
The first command imported all those IMP files right here. So this is all in the manual. You can take a look at this. The table text command is the main macro command, but it has numerous options in it. So if I let me get my manual up here. I can find table text here. You click on table text here. So there's all kinds of options. So the general layout of the command is this with your option, and then you have numerous options. So again, you can set a subtitle, title, subtitle, tab, and then the import feature. So those are the 4 features of the table text command in this case, right? So in this case, what we do here is we import them, and the reason we do that is we want to make sure we have the latest version every time, right? Sometimes people make changes to the IMP file, or we make improvements. In our case, we have dozens and dozens of tables, or if not hundreds of tables. So this is a massive automated system for us. It'll import every single file. You know, if you had 150 tables, for example, you don't want to be going table by table, going into the specified table, pressing the import button. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's exhausting. So this just takes care of it. So you can put in all your table names here. You can have them all imported. Then you can go down. It's just a very clean, easy way to control all the titles of each table you've created, all the subtitles and so on, and the tab names. If you needed to make a quick change, you could just open up this macro and then rename it. Maybe you switched from the 2012 base year to for real variables, and to once we get the 2017 data, that type of stuff, right? You can just come in here and make all the adjustments to your titles, and then just run this file. All your tables would be updated automatically, ready to go.
Gotcha.
It's just that's what we use macros for in general, right? Just trying to automate it, and so we're not clicking 5,000 times, repeating the same task. So anyways, if you need any help with this type of stuff, we can help you out in no time. We do this. We have lots of examples and files to do this type of work, and you can just take something like this and then chop it up and put it wherever you want in it. Fill in the blanks, or replace in that case. Okay, so there's a lot of power in these tables, of course, right? I mean, you know, without them, you waste a lot of time each day. So it's incredibly important to have tables that make sense and are showing the information in the right order, showing right information in general that you need to look at, that you want to see on a regular basis. So all that type of stuff. It just allows you to customize, whatever views you're really interested in on a regular basis here by creating these systems. Okay, so unless there's any questions, other questions on the table stuff, we can move on. And we can look at some of the graphing data at this point. So we have graphs in Forecast Gear. I can tell you that we certainly don't use them. And that's just because Excel is so much more superior for its graphing features and definitely a lot prettier. So but we do have the graphing option available here. You know, as I showed you, looking at this through a graph, it's fine for some quick analysis. Nothing wrong with that. You can see our little downturn in our pickup and the aggregate consumption, but it's not ideal, of course. You don't want to take this chart and put this in a presentation. You know, there's a lot better options available with Excel, for example. I'd much rather take that information, export it in a spreadsheet version like this, and then at the bottom here you can see there are the options. Let me just open up a file, a new one for you, new spreadsheet. So what you can do here, once you're viewing the variable, you can turn the headers on and off here. That's what this means. So what it does is it allows it so you can now just copy the data. So I can do, if you guys know your Control-C for copy, you can then just come in and you can put stuff in like that. Quick way of grabbing things with the dates by turning the headers on and off. Otherwise, I could just grab from 2020 to 2030. Control-C again. Let me just show you. So different ways of grabbing the information, putting it in Excel. So that's all the headers on and off option does. Otherwise, you could view a whole bunch of variables by hand and in variables box, and then you could just save as an Excel file here at the bottom, or you can also export or save as a CSV file. So there's both of those options available as well when you're viewing your data. Okay, but on the graph issue now, like I said, Forecast Gear just creates line graphs in this case, but there's also this second feature here for graphing. And in this case, it's again, you'd come in and you would choose. You can create pre-defined graphs. We took this feature out of a new version of Forecast Gear back in about 2014 or 2012 or something like that. And one of the partners in our company, he called up and he told us he liked to use it. And, you know, we were a bit surprised by that. But given that, you know, you can just automate spreadsheet dumps to Excel charts stuff instead, that's a much, you know, easier system. But he was still using this old method, being a much older gentleman. So what you can do here again is you can create a new chart. So we'll call it new graph. Oh, actually, I've already done this one. So new graph, create the file. You then come in here and you can select your series in this case. So you can have up to 5 series on a chart in Forecast Gear. Obviously, if you want to add more, you can use Excel again. But the idea here would be, you know, you could put consumption in here. I already added I was testing this last night because I never use it. But here I put consumption in, give it a title, so you can call it whatever you like. So in this case, call it 2012 millions. Oh, it's obviously limited by a length of characters here. But then you can choose, you're going to do a point graph, a line graph, or a bar graph. Typically, you want to probably just look at line. You can set the color of the line. You know, some pretty basic features here. And then here I've done YGDP as well. Again, 2012 millions, we'll say. And then after your series are defined, you should just be able, I'm not sure what the options do. Anyways, a bunch of stuff you can play with here on the legend, whether you want to show the legend box, grid lines, things like that about your chart or your graph, sorry. And then you can just say view. So if you want to pre-create some graphs in Forecast Gear, this is how you would do that. And I believe, and then there's also a system that we use. The one that we actually find useful is called FastGraph. It's a macro command, and I will show you how we work with that. So we send you this macro with the model update each time. In this case, we'll just use this one, FastGraph, and then. So in case you were wondering, anything with an exclamation mark here comments out a line in forecast here. And some of these that are tabbed in with Notepad++, you can actually just press Control Q and it turns blocks of lines on and off. So this is pretty helpful when you're setting sections up. So in this case, sometimes we want to fast graph all the investment by industry variables. In this case, so again, we're using 4 lists. We would look at the industry, we call IND as the parameter, and then you got your agriculture, other primary, oil and gas, and so on and so on, all of your industry sectors for investment. We then use this FastGraph command. So when I'll just put oops. I put the stop command in, nothing will run beyond it. File just ends there. So we're looking at investment, for example. Let's run that to 2030, too long. And what this can do, the reason this is helpful here is we're doing a comparison in this case. So we're going to have our right database open for our current forecast, and we're going to show that variable. So the INs are going to be replaced by each industry, and it's going to go one after another when it creates this. And then we're also using, this is called a concatenation statement. And what that does is it goes and it forces the program to grab the variable from a specific database. And you can see this is our 201. The latest version is the 202 forecast. So an alternate here, another way you could definitely be sure you're getting the data from the right location is to put a concatenation statement on both. I could then save that. I should tab that in to make it proper programming etiquette here. And we can then run that FastGraph, and I'll show you what it does. So it's really helpful for comparing where is your industry GDP going between forecasts or forecast versions, things like that. And what it'll do here is it goes one by one. So the first one it's going to show obviously is the agriculture. Then once I close this table or this chart, sorry, it'll pop up other primary. Oh, I don't have conventional. I'm in Manitoba. Sorry. Let me get that out. Oh no. Let's get rid of the whole primary sector. Obviously, this hasn't been used in a while, the investment. So it just walks you through your industries. You can see what your investment forecast looked like 6 months ago, or whenever you last produced a forecast. Just a quick way of charting things, looking at some of the cyclicality. In this case, this is construction. We probably moved some projects around, things like that, driving the investment outlook in different directions. And here you can see the pre-recession and with recession, or no recession and with recession version on the trade industry. You see the commercial sectors have been just decimated through this recession, so big dips expected for 2020 in our newer forecast. Accommodation and food, looking at a long recovery. Other private services, yeah. So anyways, I hope you get the concept here. It just allows you to use the graphing system in a more powerful way. It's also quite helpful for looking at like GDP in this case. So here we have our GDP block. Now we have numerous 4 lists in this case because The Manitoba model has 50 industries in it for GDP. So this is the complete list, let's put it that way. The second layer, we're just looking at the primary industries, or you're just looking at the manufacturing sector. So we would put these on and others off, depending what you want to do, right? So that's all that is. And then again, fast graph would run. Here you're selecting, you want to see a line graph. You could change that to a bar graph, things like that. So there are options here. It's all in the manual. If you want to switch anything, you set your date range, and then what do you want to show in the graph, and then up to 5 series. That is the limit on the graphing feature within Forecast Gear. So that's essentially what you can do with the fast graph command. Just a quick way of looking at all this stuff. If I run it again now. So here's the GDP industry forecast for agriculture between versions, other primary. So obviously some data revisions, things like that occur. Forestry, fishing, hunting, and trapping. Support activities for agriculture, oil and gas, metallic mineral mining. This is your coal, I guess it's 0. Non-metallic mining, support activities for mining, support activities for oil and gas, and that's it in this case. So that's what it does. So you can use your fast graph feature. It's helpful for or calibrating your model. That's what we use a lot of this stuff for, because this is a calibrated system. We want to make sure that industries aren't going way off base in their general trends, things like that. So that's really what where I guess the strengths of this come in, or if you're just depending what you're interested in, of course, it's up to you.
Aaron, you mentioned that the Manitoba model has something like you said 40 or 50 industries, right?
Correct, for GDP, yes.
For GDP, right?
GDP, so, exports and imports, not for investment. We don't model investment at that level. We would probably go nuts trying to model those sectors. Yeah. Okay. So we do investment on a 14 industry basis instead. The 14 2-digit NAIC sectors.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the 40 to 50 industries, not talking about investment here, I think what I've seen is that those industries are what, down to the 3-digit NAICS code, or does it go beyond that?
Right, it depends. So I actually have a file for you guys, and I'll email this to you. That's why I wanted to meet all you guys and get your email addresses, and I can send you this information. So this is our entire modeling system here. So I left the other provinces in here just for you to look at, but I produced this so that you can see exactly what the definition of each industry is in this case. So forestry, we're looking at 3-digit GDP, or NAIC, sorry. So if you look at the code off to the right here, if you can read, hopefully you guys can read this. Let me just hide these ones. So it just gives you, we can send you this stuff. We have all kinds of information we can send you if you ever have any questions. If you're unsure about anything, just like I said, shoot us an email. We'll help you out right away. But it gives you the definitions. And as you can see here, we're looking at 6-digit NAICS in some cases. It really depends on what level we're narrowing down to here. So yeah, you're right. Typically 3-digit is the prevailing component, but selection here. But we do get down. We try to differentiate electric power from other utilities. So there you're getting into the 4-digit definitions. Construction. These are all broken down a bit more because we need these components. On the manufacturing, most of the detail comes in on the manufacturing side. So for Manitoba, sorry, I should freeze the pane here. Let me just hide this. There we go. So you can see we're using whatever's blank, we are not using for your province. So we're not modeling beverage and tobacco products, for example. We're doing food, wood, paper, petroleum and coal, the basic chemicals, and then other chemicals. We try to differentiate these because of their energy intensity use. And I'll show you that when we get into the equation file. The reason we do these, we make these selections. What we have selected for industries, I think when we developed the model, we made sure that you were getting, it had to be a good proportion of GDP represented by these sectors. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Yeah. So I think the criteria was that they made up about 5% of GDP. In this case, don't quote me on that, but they had to be a sizable amount of GDP generated by these sectors. Otherwise, they weren't worth modeling. So we've, and then of course, as you can, you got your primary metals, all this other stuff in here as well. Yeah. Right. So
probably not 5%, because I think manufacturing is like 10% of our GDP. I think it's just Manitoba's economy is so spread out, it's so diverse that it's. But I had one question about your variables, like for the manufacturing side. So a company like New Flyer, that would be classified under other transportation. So like the bus manufacturer.
That would, yes.
Okay,
that's right. Yes.
I was just kind of looking at that there.
Sorry, because we're doing, you would do, yeah, correct. There would be other transportation. I mean, for Manitoba, this is actually transportation in this case, because you can see the definition is Industry 336 minus motor vehicles and parts, aerospace. You guys do get aerospace differentiated here.
Yeah.
So that the sum of these two would be your transportation industry 336.
Okay.
But the reason this is set up this way is because we model, obviously, for Ontario, the motor vehicle sector, right? And then when you get to the coastal provinces, we're looking at ship and boat building, that type of stuff more. So, but generally, there's all your transportation industries right there. And that's, good point. I mean, manufacturing is a very low share. So the real reason that we've disaggregated a lot of these sectors is for the energy usage system in our model. Now, I don't know if you're aware, if you've looked through the equation file, but we have an industry emissions model integrated into this thing now. So we look at the Environment Canada, obviously as the carbon tax became a big issue in this country, we had to build an emissions model for government revenue modeling for carbon, right? So we take that data from Environment Canada, and that's provided on basically on industrial processes and so forth, and we build it out so that it can be allocated to the industries, and then you can actually drive those emissions based on industrial growth, right? And you obviously have very different carbon intensities coming out of these sectors, particularly for the very heavy energy users, things like iron and steel and aluminum, and then chemical manufacturing, that kind of stuff. So that's the real reason that most of these are disaggregated. But I remember the old model, you guys did, I remember furniture was a good part of your GDP, things like that. Whatever, I can't remember some other ones, maybe food, things, a couple of these, I'd have to check the shares.
Food is a big transportation and also chemical. Primary metals not so much now, but
right.
It used to be a huge portion.
Of course.
Anyways,
the smelter shutdowns. Yeah. Anyways, okay, so it's all in here though. A lot of, as you can see, a lot of detail, and we've disaggregated. We try to get the pipelines out from general transportation and warehousing. Looking at the different components of trade. What else we have in here? Yeah, just trying to get as much detail as possible. Some of these are try to be lined up with the LFS as well a little bit. Given that we get monthly data on some of these sectors on an LFS basis, so you get there's various reasons why some industries are disaggregated or not. But I can send you this list if it helps you out to have a quick reference sheet.
Sure, that'd be great.
I'll put a note down for that. Okay, so I think we're good here with the graphs and so forth. We may as well move into the macro concepts now, looking at some of the commands. All right. So I'm going to go back to the manual here. So as you pan down on this manual, I'm not sure if anyone has looked at it yet, but you can just click on these links, on these macro commands, for example, and you'll jump right to the page. There are quite a few macro commands in this system, all kinds of stuff you can do with them that really automate the software. But a lot of the key ones, of course, the calc statement, how to open and close databases, how to set your date ranges, your data frequencies, and then of course updating data as well. So when I look at, why don't we just one of the macros here? Which one would be good? Okay, so here's one of our update macros. This is our industry macro. So what we try to do, if you remember me saying this, that an exclamation point comments out the line. So, and it looks quite good when you add the syntax highlighting, because this allows us to put in notes and so forth, and they all paint themselves green, as you can see here. So very easy to differentiate the notes from the commands, from other stuff, and then the operators and things like that painted in red. So the first thing you're going to see in most of our files, maybe if I get into your, it would make more sense if I look at the EX macros. So the first thing you're going to see in our files will be typically a title, just to let you know what file you're working in. We have what's called here version control for each model. I don't know if you guys would want to play with this, but you definitely have to explain what it is, because it's sitting at the top of every single macro file. And what it is, it's just a little for list. We call it the parameter ASD. And this implies, in ForecastKey, a pound sign, or the number sign, implies an LST file. So all this is actually saying is that. So there's a file called prov version LST. And we want to resort to this file. Oops, bring that back. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the file system in programming, but when you have a ... that means look up a folder from your current location. If it was just a single dot, that means look in this folder, in the current folder that this file is located in. So because this is located, you look at the model here, we're in the MN subfolder. That's where this file is located. So it's saying, look up a folder and find me that list. So when we send you the system, you should get a prov mods. We'll give you your Canada folder, where you'll get all the rest of world and national indicators for the model. And here's the prov version list. So all this is, when I open it up, it just has our version control code. And we use this. This is going to create your database names. It's going to create your model version number, everything. So wherever we're referring to these this version control setup, it's going and looking at this. So if I change this, next round you're going to get 211 here. So that's all this is. It's just a list file, which is really just a text file with that 202 in it. Then what we do here, this ASD gets set as this. So we set this is called a macro parameter, right? It's something you want to reuse over and over and over. You can call it at any time as you go through the macro file, and the macro parameter name will be prov-ver. So provincial, it's the provincial model version, and then it's resorting to looking at that ASD file every time. So every time we call prov-ver, as you can see here, down here, you can see this one. It's got tildes on each side of it. This is going to add that 202 in this case. So what this does, we used to have all kinds of problems back in the day before we put in this version control, is if people did not change the database names from 192, or if somebody forgot to do something like that into the new version, it would ruin your whole stuff. You could write over your old bases, your old databases, ruin all the work you'd done previously. If perhaps you didn't have a backup of that system, then you obviously wipe your stuff out. So this allows you to control. It's really a safety feature for version control. Very important when you're managing a massive file system like this. So that's all this means right here. You're going to see this in every single one of the macros. So if you're ever wondering what that is, that's all it's doing. Moving on. So we typically
Sorry, Aaron, this is a really perhaps a stupid question, but initially you're pulling from the prov version file, right? But
yes.
Right below it, you've kind of used you've used an acronym proverb. So like, I guess my question is like, how does the program know to use prover and not proversion? Like, how are you able to kind of make the connection there between that?
Okay, what this is doing is this is creating a list. It's how the for list command works, Thomas. So you have to create one parameter for the actual list name, and in this case, it goes and grabs the list file. So it'll take that information, whatever's in the file in text, and then it sets that information from the list here as your output, I guess, or your macro parameter information. So another way of doing this, once we get down to these examples right here, you could just say, could just be that, and then you would get rid of all of this.
I think Thomas, where that adds value is that if you have 20 macros that you're trying to run, and then you want to have that one variable that's outside of this.
Yeah.
Then you just have to change it at one spot instead of at 20 spots.
Correct. That's really
the only benefit.
Exactly. That's right. This is exactly what it's trying to do, but it's doing it so that it reads from a file instead.
Gotcha.
Right. Oh, keep going. There we go. So that's all it's doing. It's just so you know, it's if you ever want to control the version, you just go back to that list file sitting in the main folder. Okay, that's hopefully straightforward then. The next way we would always set these up is we try to differentiate your databases that you're going to be working with in each macro versus your date ranges. So you'll always see this same standard setup, 2 blocks next of parameters. In this case, here's the cap oil production forecast. So for us, we're hiding it here. We're not even using this code right now. I think we actually paste the forecast into this macro because you guys obviously don't have this file system on your computers. So that won't even be called, but all we're doing here is setting up parameters for the databases we're going to use. So basically these two wouldn't even be there really. They're not being used, but they are there from an old version that we were using. We've got to clean that up. But on the date side here, so we typically call all these parameters D. So we have a common date range for the forecast period, 2019 to 2050. The dates for the LFS extension. So of course we have historical data up to 2019 right now. So we would be forecasting for 2020 and on. The fixed capital stocks and flows data. So this is all your investment, and that's usually an extra year behind. We just got the latest FKSF data just I think last week. Yeah. So we'll have this will obviously be 2020 and on in the new version that we send you in January. Your GDP, you're not going to have that till March or April typically. So this will continue. This will remain as a forecast for 2020 in the January version of the model. And then we also have some other things that we have to do because we're calculating a bunch of stuff down below. So here you can see it's FKSF history. So the data goes from 96 to 2018. For the cap date range, the production forecast, I believe we have, in this case, we have production data actuals up to 16 or something like that. I'm not sure. This may not even be used. I'd have to look at it. Also on the maintenance, we do maintenance and repair data that we collect from StatCan to drive the repair construction industry of the construction sector. So again, this is just sort of an extension date range for the maintenance data. And there's the history for that, maintenance and repair data. And then on the trade data, so that's, I think we just got the 2017 actuals this month. So that'll be advanced from 18 and on. The trade data is always behind, and it's released along with the input-output framework each year. So a bit of lag on that stuff as well. But the gist of this is that you're going to just see the macro parameters all defined at the top of your file every time. So as we go through here, standard command, we always start every file with a close star. That says close all databases. You want to start from scratch. There's no junk getting into the files. We have no bases open. So close everything. Make sure it's all closed, and we'll start fresh. We then, you cannot work, you cannot run anything or compute anything if you don't have a write database open. So that we have what we call write databases and read databases, as I mentioned before. Obviously, a write database you can write to. Read databases you can only read from, but write databases you can write and read, of course. So the differentiator here on these commands would be OpenW versus OpenR. One for write, one for read. So what we're doing here is we're just opening up the history database. So the MN202 base in this case. And then we're going to set the frequency because we're working with an annual model here. The frequency would, of course, be 1. Quarterly model would be frequency 4, and the monthly model frequency 12. So you just want to make sure that we're all set up. We then move it along and we start setting our dates. So in this case, we're setting the dates, and again, we're using the parameters at the top. This way you can control in one location what the date range you're operating under is when you call these. So you'll never have to change this stuff. It should, with the way we set this up, it's always set up to operate properly for you. Next thing, so again, back to for lists. So I showed you a little bit about this. It's basically a loop, and it just goes in order. And then again, you can layer these for lists over and over and over again. If we get an example, I can show you later. But all it really does here, this is a way of taking perhaps 200 lines of code and putting it into 2 lines or 4 lines of code, right? So this is about really, not spreading it across 200 lines of the file, for example. In this case, it's obviously not that many, but that's the whole point of creating these for lists. It's just to I guess shrink the amount of code that you're having to write or pan through to look at. This way, you would know that we're setting this oil and gas. So that var is the parameter in this case. So the variable would then be named SDS OG MN. So these are just switches in this case for the oil and gas electric power sector. But and then it comes down, gets to this next list, and then it goes back to the top onto the next component, and so on if there were more of them. So that's all this is. You start your for list with the for list, you end it with the next list. It cycles around in circles till it finishes all the parameters, and then it moves on. Okay, so main model or macro commands here. So of course we have the calc statement, gets you to calculate things. So here you're just saying calc, set this variable equal to its last value in this case. So this is a lag parameter, or lag operator, I should say, an operator, not a parameter. So that's using the -1, just sets it to its last value. Again, switch the date range. Now we're looking at FKSF data. Same thing. So these are just residuals, investment residuals that we extend out over the forecast period. What else do we have? Okay, so other than calc statements, we also have update commands. So what you can do with an update command, and this is if you guys needed to overwrite StatsCan demographic data, you'd be doing so with an update statement, most likely. So in this case, the way an update command works, you use update, your variable, then your first date range, the first value date range. So what you're doing here is you're imposing ZI adjustment to have the value of 0.003 in 2020 and 0.006 in 2021. And then you could go on and on and on. So in the case of your demographic data, you'd probably have update, say update DP, MN, and say you were starting back at 1980 or something, and you'd have whatever the value would be, of course. So say, and so on and so on. So that's all you're really doing here. That's all an update command does. Every macro command, I should mention, has to end with a semicolon, or else the program will not work. You may or may not get an error if you leave that semicolon off, but you'll definitely eventually get an error because there's a lot of additional code that goes through here.
Sorry, Aaron, just a quick question.
Yeah.
For that variable there, ZIADJ, you mentioned that in 2020, the growth rate being 0.03, and then you have a space, and then the next growth rate is 0.06 for 2021. Beyond 2021, does it just continue using 0.006? Is that the idea?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have explained that more clearly. So what we're operating with, the way to read this is, what's the FKSF date range? Let's go back to the top here. So it's 2019 to 2050.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So the way to think of this is you always have to be aware of what date range you're operating in. So assuming this is 2019 to 2050, when we say calc, it's going to set that value for every period in your operating date range.
Gotcha.
So ZI adjust is 0 every year. And now all we're doing is we're just making some adjustments for 2020 and 21. In this case, you can see if you look at these are actually industry investment adjustment variables. So this is agriculture, other primary, and so forth. What we're doing is we're just boosting all sectors investment by 0.003%. Putting a very minor in this case.
I just had a question. It's almost like a refresher. If I'm not mistaken, this is from that. That's from that major projects. Those are the results from the major projects model.
Right.
And that's what caused you to actually tune it accordingly.
If I'm
not mistaken. In
some cases, yes, David.
Okay.
It depends.
So you would kind of run like a different system, and that's where you would be bypassing based on some recent information that would say the timing of some sort of investment, whether it's a pea pressuring plant or some sort of a hydro project. You would get these results, and then you'd have to kind of feather in that information here. Otherwise, you just leave it alone, essentially.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, we'll get into that when we tune, when I show you the tuning part this afternoon. But yeah, you're right. There's many reasons why you would tune your investment. Investment being an animal spirit issue, incredibly unpredictable.
Art and science.
Right. Yeah, this is where the art aspect comes into forecasting, of course. So we have tables for this kind of stuff. We call them invest non-res P. We actually this is a very useful table for this stuff. So I look at this. So here's the agriculture industry, for example. And we put all kinds of additional information on the bottom here to help guide your investment tuning in this case. So this is a bit off topic here, but but this is what we're doing here. We the model can pump out investment numbers. That's fine. Are they believable? Do you like them? So that's really the process we go through here. And this is why I said we don't tune investment for 50 industries because we're going year by year here, and it would take us weeks to get the investment forecast finished off. So doing it at a 14 sector basis is pretty much enough, I find, for what we do. But all you're doing here, the model will pump out some numbers. Is it moving in the right direction? Tough to say, of course. So yeah, this is, like I said, this is where the art aspect comes in with it. What David's talking about is when we have the major project system. So as you can see here, project investment for agriculture is 0. That's because we don't have any projects for agriculture right now of any significant size to drive the outlook for investment for agriculture. The model also generates expected sales growth. This is very important for what you're going to get out of the investment equations, and we can look at that once we go through the model. But then you also have things like, here's your capital stock for the sector, the net change in capital. So are you forming or deforming capital with that level of investment? And that will be based off of your capital depreciation rates, which are computed using the fixed capital stocks and flows data by sector. So you take that 14.7%, multiply it times last year's stock, and it says you need $514 million to keep the industry sustained or not deforming capital. So in this case, there's the difference between the two. 447, if you had another $67 million, the industry would be sustained. So this is really looking at formation and deformation of capital. So a lot of components here, but that's what these ZIs are doing here. You're just tuning industry investment. Typically, we don't even have this one on. In most cases, somebody would have put this on just because they wanted to see a little bit more business investment overall in the forecast in the current years, in 20 and 21 in this case. So if you read this code, we basically set the adjustment variable to 0. You can then modify it with these update commands. And then you have, sorry, let me highlight that for you. And then you have your aggregate ZI adjustment. Notice that is in every single one of these equations, or in every single one of these adjustment variables. You'll get the hang of this more as you play with it, Thomas.
Okay.
But what all this really does is allow you to have 2 adjustments that you can set. You can either set everybody grows a little bit more together, or you can just control that specific industry in this case. And you can see we do this by setting the calc, set all adjustments to 0 for this date range. And then we make our modifications where we want to push the industry investment around. And then again, as David said, you're feathering it in some cases. So you typically can get larger adjustments in the first year that will then phase down and out eventually into lower adjustments, generally speaking. So there are calc statements, there are update statements, there are dates commands. These are some of the very key ones that you need to know. You need the closing and opening databases, setting the frequencies, setting macro parameters. This is most of the stuff you're going to come across in these macro files on a regular basis. And then, of course, the 4 lists. I'll go through them. I don't think there's too much else we really need to get into at this moment. Generally a lot of calc update and date statements as you go through here. Yeah, no, that's it. Okay. So any questions on that stuff? I should say at any time you can always go into the and see all the entire list of macro commands. So on the second page here, we have the entire list. So a lot of additional stuff you can do.
I have one question, not exactly like specifically to the example or something like that, but I'm just wondering, like the data or example file we have in our tutorial box or tutorial folder. So are you able to show us some sort of like the entire example, like a complete example, like from scratch to have a certain output? Is this something we get in the afternoon, or like what?
We can go through that right now. You want to set something up? So let's just make a new database.
Mm-hmm.
So here we would just come into this, select access bases. So in this case, we'd select new. You can also do this right in the files command, create new base. So that's all the same option. Let's just populate a base with some dummy data. How we do that? Call it test1. You can give your database a description if you want. For example, not that it really means much. Then we can set up a macro file. So in this case, we'll create a test database. Macro, sorry. Create it. Yes. Okay. So first thing we want to do, if we're ever writing a macro, we do close star. Always important. Make sure nothing's open. We're then going to open that database. You can set our dates, for example. Maybe you want to go back to 1980 or something like that. Let's just pretend we were updating some historical data here. And you can set your frequency to 1. Okay. So given that we're operating in this date range, let's just make up a bunch of dummy variables. Now, I'm sure, Thomas, you got some exposure to this through the tutorial, doing this kind of stuff. There was a bunch of files provided, but so let's call variables test1 or something. So calc test1, set it to 0. Calc test2, set it to 0. So that's what we would call it, just initializing variables. We could then populate them with data. Actually, I had a whole bunch of data to put in. Say something like that. Okay, so just to review here, all I've done is said, let's close the base. Let's open up that test database in write mode, of course. Let's set our operating date range. We're going to be working with annual data, so we just want to make sure the frequency is correct. You know, if you didn't put this in, it wouldn't be the end of the world at all. The frequency is typically on 1 anyways as a default, so this is just for good coding practice. We'd then be setting those. We created 2 variables, set them all. Their values would be initialized to 0 for every year operating under that date range, and then we're just going to plug some data into them. Into one of them, that is. Oop. So I didn't create it. Okay. Now, what you want to do in this case, there's another command called crbase. You guys may or may not want to use this because there's different ways of doing it. You can either do it through the new base. I think I called it something else, didn't I? I called it test1. That's my problem here. But the alternative to doing it manually, you can just say crbase test1. Save that. Oops, and then make sure we open it. Now what it's going to do is when I run this, if the base didn't exist, or if it does exist in this case, it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Because it wants to make sure you don't overwrite a database. So it says base exists, continue. So you say yes. So it just ran that macro. So before we move on, I'm just going to show you that the alternate to this is you can put an over command. And this will create the new database and overwrite any existing base. So this time when I run it, I'm not going to get that question because I put that over command in. So now we have our test1 base open in write mode. We just wrote some information to it. We can go into view variables. And you'll notice that the date range is set to what was last in that file, in that macro that was just run. And we can open up the base index. And of course, we have two variables. You can choose them there just by highlighting them. And then you can just view them under this date range. So there you go. So it's got the information. We initialized everything using a calc command under that date range first, right there. And then we imposed some values using the update command. So that's really the process. That's all that we're doing here. It's essentially how you write into these databases. Does that help out, Mustafa?
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe I have to do practice, then get the confidence that I have understood what you have showed here.
I highly recommend you do the tutorial, not the entire tutorial. I think, let me just pull it up here for you, because like I said, there's a lot of stuff in there that's just beyond what you'll ever want to know. I think I tell people to do up to page 20. Where are we here? Oops. Yeah, before you even create the model. So really, if you go through this first component here, and I mean, whoops, sorry, I shouldn't have clicked on that. Even from the beginning, just up to page 21, this will get you a very good handle on using Forecast Gear. Everything we're going through today, right? So I'm sure this is a bit of a rehash for you, Thomas, but and that is why I say sometimes when I provide this training, everybody's done the tutorial, knows it up and down, and then they just want to fly through this component of learning the software. So
yeah, I did try this one yesterday, and that's what I said. Like I was just trying to get some idea. Okay, how can I get this? Because whatever impression I'm getting, like I need to know how to use the software, right? So all those things, and if we have a complete example, like and then it's gonna be more easier. That's the reason I asked you, like because maybe some people. I'm new here. I'm new to the training session and everything. So that is the reason I was asking, like, okay, if we have through something similar to the tutorial, maybe that's gonna be more easy for myself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, did you have any trouble with the tutorial? Is it?
No, tutorial is fine, but only problem, like I do not have the text editor, so maybe I have to call my IT person to install it. Maybe from there I have to sketch it. So I don't know, like it will take time.
Okay. Hey, Mustafa, troubles also come with age too, right? It's your birthday today, so I got you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's probably what it is. It's just you kind of hit that. Yeah, you hit that age. What are you, 41 now today? 40?
42.
42. That's it. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's all downhill from 42. So.
Thank you.
It was downhill at 40, I thought. So.
I don't know. 42 is the new 40.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron, and thanks everyone.
No problem. Happy birthday.
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, no, I mean, I highly recommend reviewing the tutorial. It's just going to cover what we essentially went through here, but it'll have a bunch of files already created for you with a bunch of data, actual data. It's a bit out of date, but it's irrelevant, because it's just about understanding the process here, creating bases, opening them and writing to them under a specific date range, that kind of stuff, and then how to use those update commands. So that would be my best offer for examples on how to do this stuff. Is just stick with the tutorial. Okay, so I think, yeah, no problem. So I think we've hit our first break time, guys, and this is actually, we're pretty much on track here. Maybe take a 15-minute break. Everybody can go stretch their legs, and we can come back, because I think I got through most of the stuff I want to show you with macros for now, but we can come back and review anything else, and you guys can have a think about what we just covered, and we can look at other questions you might have. How about in about 15 minutes, if that works?
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron.
Okay. All right. I'll see you guys in 15 minutes.
we just pause it and then just leave this sort of running?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how you do that. I'm not an expert at recording. Maybe if I just stop, Mike, and I can start it again, and then you can have various files for each segment of the training. Would that work?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. Then you don't have to hopefully pan through a 7-hour file or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
I will stop the recording and restart it when we come back.
Okay.
Good, Naz.
Okay. See you guys soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.